Hello and welcome to Epicenter Bitcoin episode 32. My name is Fabian Crain and today is August 10th, 2014. Sébastien is still on vacation. He's about to come back, I think tomorrow. So from next week on, he will be back in the sort of original constellation. But this time again, I'm sort of a solo host. And I'm joined today by two people. And they're Iras Miller and Freya Stevens. Iras is the CEO of Coinapult. And Coinapult is a wallet provider merchant solution that he founded together with Eric Voorhees in 2012. So, of course, Eric Voorhees is very well known in the community, I think, primarily for Satoshi Dice, but he's also been involved in other projects and has been kind of a spokesperson for a long time. And then Freya is a marketing specialist for Coinapult, and she's also the founder of the Bitcoin UK podcast. So I still haven't actually gotten around to listening to one of her episodes, but she has great reviews, so it's one of my kind of goals to do that as soon as possible. So today we'll be talking about Coinapult and especially about a new feature they launched, which is called locks. And the locks feature is kind of addressing a really key criticism that's often sort of heaped on Bitcoin, which is the volatility. And it's often seen as sort of a roadblock in the way of mainstream adoption. So they're trying to address this with the locks feature, and it's really cool and interesting. And they were also talking about a project called Let It Drop. And the basic idea of the project is to bring Bitcoin to Carribean island. So it sounds, of course, really cool. So Iras and Freya, thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi, yes, you're welcome.
Thanks, Brian. By the way, it's Iras.
Oh, I apologize. Iras, yeah.
No worries.
So Iras, are you down in Panama at the moment?
I am, yeah. It's a nice sunny day.
So let's just perhaps dive in. Can you tell us a bit about how do you get started with Coinapult?
So Eric and I started Coinapult in January of 2012, and it was designed just to be a very, very simple wallet to allow people to introduce new users to Bitcoin by sending it to their email or cell phone. And it was really designed as the simplest possible way to do this. So the original Coinapult.com just had a form that said email address, message, and then it would allow you to deposit some Bitcoins to an address for the recipient. We've taken that concept and turned it into a much more sophisticated wallet service now with accounts and some advanced hedging features like you mentioned.
So what made you in 2012 decide on starting a wallet service? Did you feel that was a kind of a big gap at the time?
It was at the time, actually. We were the first, I believe the first Bitcoin over email service and also the first SMS only wallet. So, there are a lot of people that have wallets where you can send somebody an SMS and then it redirects them to a web page where they log in and start using. But if they didn't have the internet, then they wouldn't be able to use it. Our system is different in that it allows people to use Bitcoin using only SMS messages.
But you still have to set up a wallet online then, no?
No, you don't. You can simply receive a text message. It says, welcome to Coinapult. You've got some Bitcoin. When you want to send it to someone else, you just text back to us. You say, send it to this number, and we send a similar message to them.
Oh, that's really interesting. So I guess that's slightly off topic just at the beginning, but let's get into that then. Are you familiar with 37 coins, and how does this compare to the 37 coins service?
I am familiar with 37 coins. They've got a great model, and it's very similar. I said we were the first such wallet, but now there are others popping up, and they're very welcome. This is very hard to do because you need telecom partners in various places, and 37 coins has picked an innovative way of getting around that by allowing their users in various countries to kind of become nodes for their network.
Oh, cool. So did you guys see any traction with this SMS service?
We saw some traction. There have been some people using it for the last 2 years since it came out. Unfortunately, due to our telecom providers, we were only able to launch it in the US and Canada over the last 2 years. And it really just isn't a very good fit for those markets. Most people in those markets have the internet and have smartphones and can use more advanced Bitcoin wallets. But we think that SMS is a great fit for Bitcoin overall, because most of the unbanked people in the world, well, maybe not most, a lot of the unbanked people in the world don't have internet access, and they do have feature phones.
So can you talk a little bit about how Coinapult developed? So originally there was this idea of having a really usable web wallet and the SMS thing. And I guess this was super early for a Bitcoin company, it's like more than two and a half years ago, which is sort of a dinosaur age in the Bitcoin world. So what has happened since then, and how has the vision for Coinapult changed over time?
So yeah, we initially launched these consumer wallet services to allow people to send over email and SMS. We offered these services for free. So basically we didn't make any money off of it. To kind of help fund things and pay the bills, feed us, we started doing business to business services. So people could sign up with our API and send to their users over SMS and so on. After some time, we'd also developed some very sophisticated market making software that would allow us to buy and sell Bitcoin, to basically act as a broker. We did that for quite some time, maybe the last year and a half. We've been doing that sort of business. For instance, you may have purchased, if you're in Europe, Bitcoins from Cefello. We help them acquire and clear all of their Bitcoins. Basically, this market-making software that we used for liquidity providing turned into our locks technology that we're now allowing all of our consumer wallets to access.
So is that market-making service, are you talking about arbitrage? So were you using different exchanges to trade and basically do arbitrage on them, or is that a software service you were providing to exchanges or I guess services like Cefello that directly sell Bitcoins to consumers?
Yeah, we provide services to companies like Cefello that need to buy and sell Bitcoins for their own business to work. And we do arbitrage and trade on all the major exchanges. In this way, we feel that we can get to a very well-informed price. We can have a price that is more average and more stable on a global scale than any single given exchange.
Cool. And when you look kind of forward and to Coinapult, and I guess 2 years down the line, where would you like to see the company?
I'd like to see our SMS services taking off among the unbanked. I think that this is the most important thing for Bitcoin as a whole, is to bring new consumers in and to grow access to Bitcoin. I think that so far, Bitcoin has mainly gained traction among very sophisticated, educated people who have very good internet access, who are not just able to access the internet, but are typically the most savvy people on the internet. And I think that if we really want Bitcoin to succeed, if we want the price to go up and more people to use it, we need to expand our community beyond the most savvy early adopter types. And we need to reach out to people who just want simple services and aren't necessarily trying to jump on the coolest new technology.
Okay, cool. So the focus is really kind of on especially adoption, facilitating adoption, and I guess especially among unbanked people or people that are kind of outside of the privileged first world, educated, computerized groups.
Exactly.
I might just jump in here. And one of the reasons I got involved with Coinapult is because, as you say, they've been in the Bitcoin scene for a while, since the early days when there was perhaps more focus on the promise of Bitcoin as the great equalizer, and just the grand vision for Coinapult, to my mind, and one reason I got involved with it is this expanding access to people who haven't been in the financial system, haven't had bank accounts, and just getting more people involved.
So Freya, how long have you been kind of involved with Bitcoin projects?
So I got involved at Christmas last year. So I'm a relative newbie, but one of the things that attracted me to it was the ability for Bitcoin to introduce more democratic ways for people to get more. Just it seemed like a more democratic system to me than the sort of. Well, I mean, most people know the story who listen to your podcast. The bank's centralization of wealth and to a privileged few.
Yeah. Okay. So you were attracted to that side, which I'm sure a lot of us are, and then you saw that kind of in Coinapult, the company that's pursuing that kind of vision and trying to realize that potential of Bitcoin.
Yeah, they really are involved in the longer game. They're looking at ways to improve the Bitcoin ecosystem, in the long run, not just short-term profit making, which I don't know, but increasingly I see companies coming into the Bitcoin space that are seeing short-term money-making opportunities, and it's nice to be involved with a company that see the bigger picture.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's kind of dive in a bit more into how Coinapult exactly works. So there's the locks thing, which I want to talk about in a little bit, and then there's obviously the web wallet. Are you guys also working on mobile wallets?
We're not actually working on a mobile application at the moment. Our main goal is to kind of grow access to the Bitcoin ecosystem overall, and there are already a lot of really good mobile apps out there. In addition, we've mobile optimized our website, so any mobile user can still use our wallet in we think a pretty good interface. This kind of protects them and us from, say, Apple changes their mind again and decides to kick all Bitcoin apps out of the store. Our users can still access their wallets and their funds and so on.
But I'm curious, so is there a QR code scanner when you use it on the web?
There is not. That's one thing that's definitely missing, and we will work on that.
Yeah, that seems like that should be also, I guess, something, especially if you target end consumer, that will be important in the future.
Absolutely.
Okay, so there is that. Also, I've also seen on your website that you guys are offering some kind of merchant services. Is that similar to, let's say, BitPay?
It is very similar to BitPay. We will help your company receive Bitcoin and then immediately convert it if you wish, or lock it to gold so that you can spend it later as Bitcoin again. We also do the opposite. So if you're a company that wants to net purchase Bitcoin, you can sign up with us, send us some wires, and we'll help you purchase when you're ready.
So you guys are also providing the service of I'm a merchant, I get Bitcoin, and then you guys can take those Bitcoins, sell them, and basically give me, let's say, US dollars in the bank account. Or you guys...
Exactly.
Okay, so you can, I guess, choose either as a merchant, either receive the US dollars or like the fiat currency, or sort of get rid of the volatility through the locks thing, or just keep the Bitcoins. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Oh, that's cool. I guess that's a good segue into that locks feature that we sort of mentioned a few times but haven't really gotten into. Can you tell us what the locks feature is?
Yes, so locks is a volatility reduction tool. Basically, it allows any Coinapult user to deposit Bitcoins into their account and then tie the value of those Bitcoins to a stable asset of their choice. So let's say that you really like gold, and you think that Bitcoin is very volatile, and you wish that you could store some of your value in gold and have it fluctuate with the price of gold rather than with the price of Bitcoin, you would then go to your locks page on coinapult.com. You would select lock to gold, say how many ounces of gold you wanted to lock, and you can lock down to a hundredth of an ounce of gold, or roughly $10, $12. When you click submit, it'll deduct the Bitcoins, or you can send it in from a different wallet if you want. And then from that point on, it's like you have, say, 1 gram of gold that's spendable on the Bitcoin network anytime you want. And as the Bitcoin and gold prices fluctuate, we will make sure that you always have exactly 1 gram of gold to spend. So, for example, if the Bitcoin price falls in half and gold stays roughly the same, when you unlock your 1 ounce of gold, you should get twice as much Bitcoin back. Now, the downside of that is if the price of Bitcoin doubles, then you unlock your gold, you would get half as much Bitcoin back.
Yeah, so essentially it's similar to, let's say I get some Bitcoins and I say I don't want to have the volatility. I put it on Bitstamp, I sell it for US dollar and just hold the US dollars there. Of course, in your case, it's more convenient because it's integrated in the wallet, but it's essentially a similar thing, right?
It is a very similar thing, yes. We think that we've basically made this tool just easier and more accessible. It can take weeks to sign up and get approved for an account with an exchange. And then you have to know how to use an exchange. What are limit orders? What are market orders? What does it mean to say that, there's this much volume at this price? Most people don't want to have to learn all these things, and they're not traders. So we really built locks as a tool for everyday users.
So when you talk about let's say I want to lock it to gold, because you guys, of course, have to charge a fee, because essentially on the back end, you're selling the Bitcoins, and for example, for US dollars or for gold.
Yes, we are. When you lock to an ounce of gold, we sell an equivalent amount of Bitcoin as you gave to us to create the lock, and buy 1 ounce of gold. And in this way, this is how we can guarantee that we'll always have the right amount to give you in the future, is because we hold 100% of the collateral. As far as the fee we charge, it's just a spread. So there are no fees in the traditional sense, but there is a difference in the bid and ask prices. Typically, the difference between the bid and ask prices is 2%. So if you locked and unlocked immediately, you would have roughly 2% less Bitcoin than you started with. Clearly, this service isn't designed to be, immediate lock and unlock. That doesn't serve you any good. It's for eliminating volatility over time. So we think that over the course of maybe a week or two, this 1 or 2% is basically wiped out by the natural volatility of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, I tested it out last week, and it worked exactly the way advertised. I used like $1 to lock it to, or 1 Bitcoin. Oh, $1 worth of Bitcoin to lock it to $1 and then lock it back, and it costs exactly 2 cents in the end to do that. So I also afterwards I went to the blockchain and I checked, what happened with my coins, and they never moved from once I paid them in. So how does that exactly work? Do you hold an amount of Bitcoin sort of on reserve with exchanges, or can you talk a bit about the kind of what goes on behind the scenes when that happens?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, when you create a lock, we sell an equivalent amount of Bitcoins and buy the amount that you lock to. So if you're locking an ounce of gold, to continue with our example, and it's costing you 2.2 Bitcoins today, which is just a very rough estimate, we will sell 2.2 Bitcoins and buy 1 ounce of gold upon locking. And when you want to unlock, we will sell the 1 ounce of gold and buy however many Bitcoins it is at that market price and make those available to you. We do have accounts on numerous exchanges and other Bitcoin liquidity providers to be able to facilitate this. And we do keep Bitcoins on reserve with these, our own Bitcoins for exactly for facilitating this sort of liquidity. So the Bitcoin that you sent us initially goes into our shared wallet, and it's not necessarily that exact Bitcoin that we're promising you back. We're promising an equivalent amount of Bitcoin back.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you talk about the silver thing, I think that's interesting, right? So because you offer gold and silver, now it makes sense for me that the dollar is really easy because there's a very liquid market there. But when you talk about gold and silver, does that mean you're gonna have to trade the dollar for the Bitcoin for dollar and then the dollar for silver? And does that mean the fees are going to be much higher, or do you have some other ways of making that work?
You hit the nail on the head. We do, because of the liquidity problem between Bitcoin and silver, for instance, we do purchase the silver using dollars or euros, and similar with gold. But for us, this is not a significant cost. Once we've got the infrastructure set up to do this and to do the accounting for it, then it's very easy. It's not significantly harder than locking to dollars or euros or British pounds for us. So we don't charge any more for it. You get the same 2% spread when you're locking silver or gold as you do when you're locking dollars or euros.
No, that's cool. I would have expected that this would be more expensive, because you'll have more illiquid markets, etc. But that's really cool that you're able to do this for the same fee.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, we're lending our liquidity just to provide the best possible user experience.
So there's one topic I kind of want to touch on. I guess before that, one more point on this. What about counterparty risk in this case? So obviously you guys are a web wallet, so anybody who sort of understands how Bitcoin works, they realize that there's a counterparty risk there, right? Just the same as with Coinbase, etc. If somebody hacks Coinapult, there's a risk. But essentially, we're doubling the counterparty risk, because there's a risk on your side, I guess, on the one hand, and there's also the risk on the side of the parties that you guys hold those values with. Is that correct?
That's one way to look at it. I think that can be. We do a lot to greatly reduce that, and in a lot of cases, the parties that we're holding, for instance, euros with, those accounts are actually insured to some degree, and we're looking at getting more advanced insurance for them. So it's not necessarily doubling the risk. In some ways, we hope to actually be able to greatly reduce the risk. But yes, anytime you are using a service like this, there is some counterparty risk. We don't want to mislead people into believing that we're somehow getting rid of that. And frankly, we just want to prove ourselves as a party that's worthy of that through good stewardship and following through on our promises.
You've also got to weigh it up against the risk that people perceive in entering the Bitcoin space in the first place, which is what we're really trying to tackle. The people that aren't in Bitcoin at the moment because they see it as such a great risk. So, if we can mitigate that risk to some extent, I think that's doing a service to the Bitcoin ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely, Freya. That's a good point. And of course, another point is that, even if you hold in your own computer, it takes a considerable expertise to do that in a way that's actually safe. So in many cases, people may be better off to keep their Bitcoins with a company like Coinapult or Coinbase or a web wallet like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And as somebody who definitely didn't come into Bitcoin with technical knowledge of how it works, I'm a good sort of tester for their system. If it makes sense to me and I find it easy and enjoy using the service, it's always a 2 thumbs up that the general public will also think the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm really curious about something. So, and then I'm sure you guys have looked into that, because one of the promises that has been in the air for a long time by projects like Mastercoin, a lot of these other Bitcoin 2.0 projects, is to create cryptocurrencies that are essentially tracking or pegged to fiat currencies. So let's say the US dollar. And I think I get one way of doing that is having some sort of contract for differences, or I honestly never looked very deeply into how exactly they were thinking of doing that. And I guess I'm not sure if something like that exists, but have you looked into that? Do you think that is possible? Do you think that may be something where you could go to in the future?
Yeah, we've looked into this pretty extensively, and we think that most of these systems are still very early, and they're not actually addressing the counterparty risk, which is kind of their main claim, is that they're going to somehow reduce the counterparty risk. But no matter what sort of contract you try to do, if the other party is betting on, for instance, gold, and they don't actually have the gold, then they're not going to be able to keep good on their end of the contract. So, for instance, you mentioned a contract for difference, a CFD. If you're making a contract for difference between Bitcoin and gold, and you're on the Bitcoin side, and the other party doesn't actually have the gold or have an equivalent amount of gold, they may not be able to make good on their side of the contract. And in a much simpler case than a CFD, for instance, on Ripple now, there are people issuing, gold-backed Ripple tokens and similar. But in these cases, it's even more clear where the counterparty risk is. It's with who the token issuer is, who actually is holding gold and issuing gold Ripple tokens. And these transact around the Ripple network, and yet everyone holding one of those or accepting one of those is implicitly trusting the issuer and the continual holder of the underlying collateral, the gold. So really, we see locks as no different from these. We could easily issue a gold Ripple or master coin, a colored coin, something like that. But we wouldn't actually be solving any problems. There would still be the exact same counterparty risk. The users would still be trusting Coinapult. And what's more, our users then wouldn't be able to use the Bitcoin network. They would be stuck on one of these smaller, less well-connected, less supported cryptocurrency networks. So an example is with Coinapult and a gold lock, you could go to overstock.com and purchase a laptop directly deducting from your gold lock. So it's almost, as far as you're concerned, like you're purchasing a laptop for gold. Whereas if you were using Ripple or Realcoin, which is a dollar-backed master coin that is announced, you would have to first convert your master coins or your Ripple tokens to something that Overstock would accept, Bitcoins, and then you would be able to go and purchase your goods using Bitcoin. There are some retailers that accept Ripple, and hopefully soon there will be some that accept master coins, but it's just a much smaller community, and therefore we think less valuable to our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that makes total sense. So I've just always been curious about this. Is it actually possible? And how will this work? But of course, if it just sort of shifts the counterparty risk somewhere else, then that's not necessarily, then that's not necessarily a benefit at all.
That's basically how we feel.
Now, have you looked into whether there's a way of decentralizing this somehow?
When you say decentralize this, there are a few different risks, a few different steps along the way. Some of them can be decentralized, some of them can't. I think the biggest question that people have is for counterparty risk, like we've just been discussing. And I think that a lot of these Bitcoin 2.0 systems claim to be reducing the counterparty risk. And we think that's pretty misleading because there's always another party to transactions like this. And to say that you're not trusting them is simply incorrect. There are some things that can be decentralized about blocks or a similar sort of service. In Lock's case, we are basically just plugging into the Bitcoin protocol, which, as you know, is already decentralized. So we're admitting that we are the counterparty risk for when you want to use to store your value in a centralized asset, as there is no other way aside from trusting some counterparty. Our goal is then to be a trusted counterparty to allow you to do this when you want to, but when you don't want to give you immediate access to the decentralized network where you then take full control again. So really, the Bitcoin protocol is our mechanism for allowing our customers to decentralize their assets whenever they choose to. And the way that we've tried to connect the two is to make it as easy as possible to go from Bitcoin into a lock and out of a lock, maybe even without signing up for an account. You can fund a lock directly from the network. You don't have to first deposit it into your Coinapult account and then lock it after. And similarly, you can withdraw it directly from a lock to any other address on the network.
Yeah, cool. No, I think that makes sense, and it's. I mean, I think the way I guess I look at something like locks, I think it's just a really nice and useful service that deals with an obvious problem in Bitcoin, and yeah, I mean, I think so. I think that's something very positive, and something I like a lot, and I like a lot that you can essentially stay 100% in Bitcoin. But get rid of some of the volatility, right? So if you're, let's say, a merchant and you accept Bitcoin and you don't like the volatility, but you still want to be 100% in Bitcoin, then that's something you can basically do with this at, pretty reasonable cost. 2%. It's obviously not cheap, but it has big advantages because if with the high volatility that Bitcoin has, and I personally don't think it's going to go away anytime soon, that's a real benefit.
Absolutely. You mentioned businesses. We think that this could be very interesting for businesses as they start to complete their supply chain. So, for instance, there's been some speculation recently as Overstock accepts Bitcoin already, and recently Dell started accepting Bitcoin. And Overstock sells Dell products. So one possibility now is that Overstock can start to integrate their Bitcoin into their supply chain, what we call vertical integration, and purchasing their stock from Dell using Bitcoin. This is just I don't think either company has talked about this, but it's just a clear possibility at this point that people in the community are talking about. If that happens, then Overstock may wish to use something like locks in that case, because they know that they're going to need some Bitcoin in the future for purchasing their stock to refill after purchases. And rather than converting to dollars, which is what they do with most of the Bitcoins they receive today, they would almost certainly prefer to keep as much of it in Bitcoin as they could to facilitate this future transaction. At that point, though, they're exposing themselves to risk for, let's say, the 1 month in between, when they sell the last laptop and when they need to pay for the next one that they're buying to replace it in their stock. They could use a lock for that period to protect the profits that they have. And at the time when the bill is due, they would simply unlock, pay over the Bitcoin network, and we would have hopefully a new level of integration in the Bitcoin economy.
Yeah, it's an additional tool. So that's one use for it, but we expect that the community will find new uses for it that we perhaps haven't thought of yet. If a business has an idea where they want to use the Bitcoin network, but obviously the price volatility is an issue, they can partner with us and provide locks to their users.
I've noticed when I signed up, there was a limit. It said of like $3,000 that I was able to lock. Why is that? Do you require some kind of KYC to go higher, or how does that work?
Yeah, we will be raising this in the future. $3,000 is actually per transaction. So you can lock, I think, up to $25,000
okay.
right now, but you can only do 3,000 at a time.
Okay. No, that changes a bit. Of course, 25,000 is a lot more than 3,000.
That's actually per asset. So there are 5 assets: gold, silver, dollars, euros, and pounds. So you can do $25,000 worth of each.
Yeah, true, right. But of course, if you're targeting businesses, then I guess it depends a lot, but I'm sure you would have then sort of individual conversations with those businesses to have.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, for businesses that are willing to go through our KYC process, we can lift all these limits.
So KYC process brings up something interesting. Does this have any kind of regulatory implications? Do you guys have to, is this a financial service, this locks thing? I mean, you guys are in Panama. I have no idea how this works down there, but can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. We think that locks is basically a new service. It's a new type of tool. We don't necessarily believe that Bitcoin is money or currency. In a lot of places in the world, it's not legally defined that way. The landscape around Bitcoin legally is very diverse, though, and so we look at it on a country-by-country basis. And in areas where it looks like these services would be more regulated, we've taken a wait-and-see approach and have blocked those markets. So indeed, in the U.S., we have actually blocked the U.S. market for the moment, as things like the bit license are kind of flushed out, and we see really what the rules of the road are going to be going forward.
So you do this by blocking the IP address?
Exactly.
I guess that brings up a topic that I've wanted to touch on as well. And since the bit license proposals come out, I think everyone who's been on, who has some kind of startup, I've asked about the bit license thing, because I've read it with a lot of attention, and I think it's really it has crazy implications if one thinks through all at least if it goes through the way it's been drafted. So I guess I'm sure you guys don't want to get a bit license. So is your strategy to essentially block American users?
That, for the moment, is our strategy, and I'll say we definitely do not want to get a bit license as it's currently proposed. The current bit license is basically a free giveaway of the economy to the banks. There's nothing in it that's really reasonable for a Bitcoin business. Certainly not a Bitcoin startup. And as this is a very new space, we hope that there are many more startups and much more innovation that will continue to go on. It shouldn't just stop at this point. And if you don't have $10 million to spend on licensing and compliance, then tough luck, get out of the business. So yeah, I mean, we think that the bit license is absolutely the wrong direction to be going in. This technology is so new, no one even knows what it's going to be used for in 2 years or 5 years. So how can we make rules like this for it that are so incredibly restrictive? The use of blockchain technology for messaging, for contracts, for completely non-monetary things is just starting to really take off. And in this way, New York is basically trying to just crush it. That's the only reasonable explanation I can see for why they would propose something like this. They have no real interest in facilitating this technology, and every interest in finding ways to make it unfeasible and unattractive to the users.
But do you guys think blocking IP addresses is enough? Because from my understanding, it probably is not. No?
What do you mean enough? Enough legally?
Yeah, because in the end, if let's say a New York user was using the lock service while they're not in US, so with a different IP address, or let's say they use some kind of proxy or
VPN.
Yeah, VPN. I think that probably wouldn't necessarily protect you guys.
That's not what we've read, and frankly, there's no technologically feasible way to make sure that somebody isn't trying to fool us and using a VPN or something like that. All we can do is kind of our best efforts, and that's what we've done with this IP blocking and similar stuff. Now, this is just a general problem. This isn't a question for us. It's a question for Ben Losky and those who would wish to regulate Bitcoin. Is, okay, you've got these rules now. How are you going to enforce them? How are you actually going to? Well, they're not going to enforce them at all. How are you going to ask companies to enforce this? To do all this what I consider dirty work on their own customers. The Bitcoin network doesn't even provide a mechanism in most cases. For instance, someone sends you Bitcoin to pay for some goods at a retail store. Under the BitLicense proposal, you would be required to gather KYC information on this user. But the Bitcoin protocol doesn't provide a mechanism for doing that. So it's really just an unenforceable, silly rule. To quote Stephen Pear, the CTO of BitPay, why don't they just put up a great firewall like China did? It's on them to enforce this.
It's also worth saying that our goal is to maximize access to our services, and we are looking for ways to help the US into our help them access our products. So it's hopefully this is just a temporary situation, and then we've got legal teams who are helping us navigate sort of the tricky situation that the regulators have put us in, really.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with both of you guys. I mean, so in my view and in my understanding of the BitLicense thing, one of the terms in there is that any company under BitLicense needs to have sort of a complete record of all the parties of all the transactions. But of course, that is just insane, right? Because the only way, in my view, to be truly compliant with this, if it goes through the way it's proposed, is if everybody does KYC, even if you don't want to get a BitLicense, just to exclude the people, just to exclude the New Yorkers, so you can say, I don't have to get one. And then you'd also have to sort of prevent transactions from unknown addresses. Because, of course, if it's an unknown address that's, let's say, paying money into your wallet, how would you know it's not someone from New York? And then that's completely absurd, right? It's literally impossible. But yeah, hopefully they will sort of come around to something at least a little bit more reasonable that then would at least not put as much of a burden on the companies that don't want to get a BitLicense.
Well, not to mention the other customers. I mean, I'm surprised that there hasn't been more international backlash against this, because if you're a customer from Europe, for instance, that uses a service that also does business in New York, all of a sudden it's your privacy. It's when you want to do a transaction in the future, they're going to be asking for your information. And so, businesses are really being faced with this tough choice to either start treating all of their consumers everywhere in the world, all their customers everywhere in the world, like a bank, or even stricter than a bank would, or block New York. And for us, it's a very easy decision. We don't want to treat our customers like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think if you look at the license thing, the implications kind of are that any company that's going to comply with the BitLicense thing, they're going to have to make their product a lot less attractive. So, I mean, in my case, it seems very likely that if this goes through, Coinbase, let's say, starts doing BitLicense, well, I probably will stop using Coinbase, right? So it seems to me that even the companies that would have to get one should lobby really hard not to do that. And I think that even is true for companies that are really well funded and have lots of money, and for whom the legal costs are not such an issue.
I think that your analysis is very logical, Brian, but I don't have faith that all of these companies are actually lobbying against it. Unfortunately, I think some of them see the opportunity to cut out competition by raising the barrier to entry.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm afraid you may be right. Yeah, we certainly haven't seen a lot of backlash from any of the big companies. So, actually, let's briefly go into a topic that you've been dealing on, Freya, as kind of in your work for Coinapult, which is the marketing of Bitcoin products. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's interesting. It's an emerging market, so there's a lot of audience discovery to do. And coming from previously working in London for an advertising company, and in very well-trodden areas of marketing, the contrast is massive. So it's quite exciting. So it's about finding where people are who might be potential Bitcoin users and reaching out to those who already are. And we've come up against some hurdles, as in where is there to advertise? I mean, the Bitcoin community is still quite small. And the number of places to actually put adverts up, and yeah, I mean, it's exciting stuff for me as a marketeer.
So, what are some of those core differences between advertising in an area that's, I guess, well established versus something like Bitcoin? I mean, you mentioned, I guess, lack of outlets, media outlets. But what else is there?
Well, I guess one of the big differences is that you're not fighting a million companies for visibility as well, which is pretty nice. So there's the potential to get seen by the people that matter very quickly, and that's nice too. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it is I think social media marketing based, because of the lack of media outlets. And I mean, you must know with your show, there's your podcast and a handful of other podcasts that are sort of globally facing, and it's kind of like that across the board, really, in the different areas. So that the sort of there's less places to be seen.
I guess a big challenge must also be to just figure out how to communicate. Like how do you explain something like locks? Because it's new, no?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we've had talks about how to reach out about our products and get people to kind of understand what we're doing. And yeah, we're hoping to do a series of webinars, so people can, if people are interested but they perhaps don't quite understand, how it works, then we can. We're hoping to have one-to-one sessions with people, and get people to kind of come along to a webinar, and we can explain a bit more.
Yeah, that sounds great. Although that being said, I think you guys actually have done a really good job. I think it's really intuitive and easy to use, and I didn't have a lot of difficulties figuring out how to use the Coinapult wallet and then including the locks thing. So I think you've done a good job there.
Yeah, great, thank you. I mean, we did do a lot of work before going to launch, to get the product being really simple to use, and visually really easy to navigate through, and I definitely had some things to say about that coming into the space as a non-techie. It was I think it was quite helpful to have that perspective on things, to say, this needs to be we need really big clear buttons. that's one of my favorite things when I go to a website. I need to see big buttons. But yeah, I mean, it's all those things. So we didn't go to launch until we were happy that our product was gonna be usable for the general public.
Cool. Well, I think it was really cool talking about the Coinapult stuff, and I really urge people to check it out. So coinapult.com, and I think it can be especially interesting if you hold a lot of money in Bitcoin, or if you receive your salary in Bitcoin, if you get paid in Bitcoin, if you sell things for Bitcoin, then I think things like the locks thing can be super relevant. So I urge anyone to kind of check it out and give it a try. So before we kind of wrap up, you guys have mentioned a really exciting project, and I'm super excited to talk about it. So it's called Let the Bit Drop. Can you give us a bit of background on it?
Yes, so we've been working on the Bit Drop for over a year now. The basic idea is that we are going to send every single person in an island nation some Bitcoin. all at once. So when we're done, there will be tens of thousands, at the end of that day, there'll be tens of thousands of new Bitcoin users, and it will instantly become the largest, highest density population of Bitcoiners in the world. We're going to do this in Q4. We're hoping in the next week or maybe 2 weeks to announce the specific date and the name of the island. We're going to throw a party at the same time on the island where we'll have educational materials, Bitcoin ATMs. We're talking to local vendors to get them to come out and sell drinks and snacks and things like that. And we're just hoping that it'll be a big smash and that these people that are mostly unbanked will find some use for it.
What kind of what amount will be given to the people?
We are just starting to fundraise, so really it depends on how much the community is willing to send to us. If you go to letthebitdrop.com, there's a donation address. And if you donate more than 0.1 Bitcoins, then we'll enter you into a raffle, and you can actually win tickets to come down and enjoy the party on our beautiful Caribbean island. Because it's been so long in the making, we haven't really set a final budget yet. We kind of figured that whatever the community is willing to give, we'll distribute that to the islanders with some amount set aside for making for the educational materials, for getting the ATMs and all that stuff down there, and just kind of operations for the party.
I think one interesting scenario, of course, would be, right, so like you're giving out this money to the islanders, and let's say it ends up being, $3 per person. Then the question is, what's going to happen with that, right? Does that mean people are going to start using it, and then they have to use it as a sort of, to give it a different value for it actually to be used in transactions, Is that something you guys have thought about, whether you may have like totally different exchange rate in that locale? I guess that would only happen unless you have a liquid market of the local currency to Bitcoin.
That's very fascinating. Yeah, we're just curious, I guess, as to how people are going to use this. Most of these people don't have any access to financial services right now, so it may be so foreign that it takes a while to really spread the knowledge of how to use it and what the potential is to spread amongst the people. But we do think that there are going to be a core of people who do get it. Maybe some of the business owners that we're reaching out to now will continue to support it. We're leaving ATMs on the island, so it will be a relatively liquid market. It can't trade too far outside of the global range, or else the ATM operators will pull the island's market back towards the kind of international standard. But really, yeah, we don't know. No one, I don't think anybody knows, because there hadn't been this kind of outreach to the unbanked communities yet with Bitcoin. And so far, what we've seen with Bitcoin is technically savvy, wealthy people and how they use it. And they may think, oh, do I want to pay with Visa today, or do I want to pay with Bitcoin? But that simply isn't even an option for these people. So we're just looking forward to watching and observing.
And the drop is planned to happen towards the end of this year, right? Or
yes, in Q4.
Q4, cool. I mean, I think this will be super fascinating to see what comes out of that. Like, I can't wait. I think it's like an amazing experiment. I think the MIT thing is a bit similar, right? Of course, totally different audience. So it's quite hilarious that two similar kind of like drop projects are happening at a similar time. And one is targeting some of the best educated, well-off, most technologically savvy, intelligent people, and then you have another project that's targeting really like low-tech, poor and unbanked people. So it would be super cool to see, what kind of different uses we'll see with Bitcoin.
I'm excited to see how this will be different from that in terms of because the government have got behind it, the local governments, whether the fact that they will be sending out educational materials to the people, whether that will have an impact differently on how the public kind of take to Bitcoin. That for me is kind of the fascinating thing to wait and watch.
Yeah, absolutely. It's cool that you guys managed to kind of get the government behind that. That's, I think, of course, that makes it easier. Also, the smaller the place you go, right, the more reclusive. I think you will have less of a kind of influence of banks and the paranoia that perhaps makes this difficult in other places.
Absolutely, and the government's been very, very nice to us. I think in addition, the smaller the governments and the smaller the place, the more open they are to innovation and trying new things. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. This is a relatively poor country, and they are willing to try new things to improve the economic conditions that they have. And frankly, I think that they're going to succeed.
Cool. Well, I'm super. So if people want to check this out and if they want to participate, what are the best ways they can do that?
At the moment, we're still working out some of the finer details. So the best way to participate is to go to letthebitdrop.com. You can there donate and watch for more details. You can follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is thebitdrop. And as I mentioned earlier, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be coming out with much more details about the project, the name of the islands, the date, hopefully some of our musical guests and things like that that are going to be attending the party. Just follow us on Twitter. Check out our website, letthebitdrop.com, and we'll keep you up to date.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, guys. But perhaps before we wrap up, Freya, do you want to talk a little bit or tell us a bit more about the podcast you've been doing?
Yeah, I can do. So, I've just been running a podcast for about 4 months now. And I got into Bitcoin listening to podcasts that were coming out of the USA, and they really got me fired up and excited about Bitcoin. And so, I just thought perhaps it'd be good to have different voices in the mix. So, so I thought doing my podcast, which is the Bitcoin UK podcast, would be a good idea, just to kind of, just to expand, the number of places where people can go to get information and focus on what's happening in the UK as well. There's a lot of good stuff going down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's very few podcasts in Europe. I mean, there's, me and Sébastien, we're both in Europe, and there's yours. I don't know if there are any other. Well, no, there's some more. There's one in Austria and there's another one in Germany, I know at least. But there's definitely not as much as in US. So I think it's great to see another European-focused podcast as well.
Absolutely. And then there's room for more, even still.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, guys. It was really great to talk about Coinapult, talk about regulations and Let the Bit Drop project. So, thanks so much for joining.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks for having us, Brian.
Yeah. And of course, also thanks for listening to the show. If you want to support us, you can do so by donating, and you can do that at epicenterbitcoin.com/tips. You can also follow us on Twitter at EpicenterBTC. And what's also very helpful is leaving us an iTunes review so people can find the show, and you can also let us know what what you like about the show and what we can do better. So thanks so much for listening, and we'll be back next week.